The most powerful message Queen Elizabeth ever left was never delivered from a balcony, never broadcast in a Christmas speech, and never written into a public decree. It was quiet, private, sealed, and yet it may reveal more about the future of the British royal family than any speech she gave during her 70-year reign. When Queen Elizabeth passed away at Balmoral in September 2022, the world focused on ceremony, the gun salutes, the long queue in London, the solemn procession through ancient streets. But while the cameras were fixed on ritual, something far more intimate was unfolding behind palace walls. A private will, a personal decision, a choice that did not have to satisfy Parliament, public opinion, or political strategy. And in that choice, she selected Lady Louise Windsor. Not the future king, not the queen consort, not one of the most senior working royals, Lady Louise. At first glance, the inheritance sounds simple. A cottage within the Balmoral estate, a peaceful residence tucked inside the Scottish Highlands, surrounded by forests, moorland, and open sky. But Balmoral is not just another royal property. It is not owned by the crown. It does not belong to the state. It has been privately held by the monarch since Queen Victoria and Prince Albert purchased it in 1852. That detail changes everything. Balmoral was Elizabeth's sanctuary. It was where she went to breathe, where she rode horses, where she walked her dogs without ceremony, where she could exist not as a sovereign, but as a wife, mother, and grandmother. It was the only place where the monarchy softened into family. And it is also where she took her final breath. To leave a part of Balmoral to someone is not a casual gesture. It is not a symbolic ribbon cutting. It is deeply personal. You do not divide your refuge unless you're certain about who belongs inside it. That is why this story matters, because this was not an official redistribution of titles. It was not a constitutional maneuver. It was a private act, and private acts often speak louder than public ones. Lady Louise Windsor has never chased headlines. Born prematurely in November 2003, weighing just 4 pounds, her entrance into the world was quiet and medically fragile. She grew up away from the spotlight under the steady guidance of Prince Edward and Sophie, who built their family life deliberately outside the noise that often surrounds the senior line. When Louise had the option to be styled as a Royal Highness, Princess Louise, she did not embrace it publicly. She became Lady Louise instead. She chose discretion over elevation. She chose a lower profile in an institution that can magnify even the smallest gesture. That choice did not go unnoticed. In a family that has endured interviews, memoirs, public grievances, and televised fractures, silence carries weight. Loyalty carries weight. Restraint carries weight. And Queen Elizabeth understood weight better than anyone. In her later years, she watched the monarchy strain under pressure. She saw relationships fracture. She saw trust tested. She saw how quickly public narrative could shift. Through all of it, Louise remained steady. No interviews, no commentary, no commercial ventures, just study, family, and a quiet dedication to the traditions her grandfather loved. When Prince Philip passed away in April 2021, one of the most striking images was not a speech, but a carriage. 17-year-old Louise driving the Duke of Edinburgh's carriage in tribute. She did not do it for spectacle. She did it because he had taught her, because it mattered to him, because she did not want his place to sit empty. That image lingered. Queen Elizabeth saw that, too. A monarch's will is sealed for decades. In the United Kingdom, senior royal wills remain private to protect institutional dignity. We will not read the pages. We will not see the signatures. But throughout her reign, Elizabeth communicated through action, through invitation, through proximity, through who stood beside her when moments mattered. And in the end, she left part of her most cherished place to Louise. Then came the unexpected layer. After Elizabeth's passing, the Balmoral estate transferred into the hands of King Charles. Control shifted, authority shifted. Yet, sources suggest that Prince William took steps to ensure Louise's inheritance moved forward without friction. That detail matters because William is not merely a supportive cousin. He is the future king. Every action he takes now reflects the structure he intends to build later. When he protects someone quiet, someone loyal, someone aligned with tradition, he is not only honoring the past, he is shaping the future. And not everyone appears to be inside that emerging circle. This is why a cottage in Scotland is not simply a cottage. It is a signal, a placement, a message about who embodies the values Elizabeth guarded for 7 decades. The will may be sealed for 90 years, but the choice was visible the moment it was made. And sometimes in the monarchy, silence says everything. To understand why this inheritance carries emotional weight, you have to understand Balmoral not as a postcard castle in the Scottish Highlands, but as the only place where Queen Elizabeth was not entirely the queen. Balmoral Castle sits in Aberdeen, surrounded by roughly 50,000 acres of rugged landscape, heather-covered moorland, pine forests, rolling hills, and cold, clear rivers cutting through the land. It is beautiful, yes, but more importantly, it is private. And in the life of a monarch, privacy is rarer than jewels. Unlike Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, Balmoral does not belong to the state. It was purchased in 1852 by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert with their own personal funds. That distinction is critical. It means Balmoral has always existed outside the machinery of government. It is not tied to parliamentary funding. It is not bound by constitutional symbolism. It is family property. For Queen Elizabeth, Balmoral was freedom. Every summer the royal family retreated there. Official schedules softened, public engagements thinned, formal dress codes relaxed. At Balmoral, Elizabeth wore headscarves and boots, not tiaras. She walked her dogs across open fields. She drove herself across gravel roads. She hosted informal barbecues instead of state banquets. It was the closest the monarchy ever came to normality. That is why the location of her death in September 2022 felt almost poetic. She did not pass away in the center of power. She passed in her sanctuary. Now consider this. If you had one place on earth that allowed you to step out of duty and simply exist, who would you trust with a piece of it? A political ally, a necessary public partner, or someone who embodied the values that place represented? Balmoral was never about hierarchy. It was about belonging. Over the years, royal observers noted subtle patterns. Who was invited frequently? Who stayed longer? Who appeared in photographs walking beside the Queen along the estate's quiet paths? Balmoral was where relationships were revealed without press releases. Prince Edward and Sophie were often present in her later years. Their visits were steady, uncontroversial, and unpublicized. Their children, including Lady Louise, grew up with Balmoral, not as spectacle, but as familiarity. Louise did not arrive there as a public figure. She arrived as a granddaughter. That distinction matters. Inside the gates of Balmoral, the monarchy sheds layers. Titles soften. Protocol relaxes. What remains is character. Elizabeth valued discretion. She valued consistency. She valued those who did not weaponize proximity for personal leverage. Balmoral was the testing ground of those qualities. When Prince Philip was alive, he and Elizabeth spent extended periods there. It was where he pursued carriage driving across open land, where he designed improvements to the estate, where he could escape the rigid expectations of palace life. After his passing in April 2021, Balmoral became even more reflective, more intimate. Louise's connection to Philip through carriage driving was not ceremonial. It was learned on that land. Hours spent practicing, conversations away from cameras, shared silence. The estate carries memory. That is why an inherited cottage inside its grounds is not simply real estate. It is entry into a private circle of memory. There are multiple residences within the Balmoral grounds. Craigwan Lodge has historically been used by members of the family before the main summer season begins. Smaller cottages provide accommodation for relatives and trusted guests. Each one exists within walking distance of the castle, but far enough to maintain personal space. To grant one of these properties is to say, you are part of this core. It is easy to underestimate this gesture because it lacks spectacle. There was no televised announcement, no balcony appearance, no formal investiture, but quiet decisions often reveal priorities that public ceremonies obscure. And there is another layer. When Queen Elizabeth's estate passed to King Charles upon her death, legal ownership of Balmoral shifted. Yet the emotional architecture of the place remained tied to her memory. Any continuation of her private wishes required alignment among senior family members. This is where the inheritance becomes more than sentimental. It becomes structural because Balmoral represents continuity. The British monarchy survives not only through constitutional order, but through carefully maintained internal cohesion. Who gathers at Balmoral signals who is trusted. Who is trusted signals who influences the future tone of the institution. In recent years, the monarchy has faced fractures. Public interviews, memoirs, legal battles, reputation management. Against that backdrop, Balmoral has remained a constant, a place untouched by commercial narrative. To position Lady Louise within that landscape is to position her within stability, and stability is currency inside a constitutional monarchy navigating modern scrutiny. There is also symbolism in generational transition. Queen Victoria purchased Balmoral. Elizabeth preserved it. Charles now holds it. The estate carries dynastic continuity. Each generation imprints its values upon it. If Elizabeth chose to place Louise within that continuity, it suggests she saw in her something aligned with that lineage. Not loud ambition, not strategic alliance, but steadiness. And perhaps that is the quiet truth beneath the inheritance. Balmoral is not where the monarchy performs. It is where it remembers who it is. To receive a piece of that world is to be told without fanfare, you belong here. And in a family defined by both privilege and pressure, belonging may be the rarest gift of all. If Balmoral represents belonging, then Lady Louise Windsor represents the kind of belonging Queen Elizabeth quietly protected. To understand why this inheritance carries emotional resonance, we have to look beyond property and into character. Because in royal families, character is often revealed not through grand gestures, but through the absence of noise. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth, Mary Mountbatten Windsor, was born in November 2003, 8 weeks prematurely. Her birth was not a grand spectacle. It was a medical emergency. Delivered via cesarean section at Frimley Park Hospital, she weighed just 4 pounds. For hours, there was uncertainty. The palace did not immediately issue triumphant announcements. Instead, updates were cautious. Both mother and child needed stability before celebration. That beginning matters. Louise's life did not begin with public fanfare. It began with fragility. Within her first year, she underwent surgery to correct esotropia, a condition in which one eye turns inward. The procedure was necessary, delicate, and quietly handled. There were no media tours, no staged family portraits to capitalize on sympathy. From the beginning, her life was shielded rather than showcased. Her parents, Prince Edward and Sophie, built their household deliberately outside the glare that surrounds the direct line of succession. Edward, the youngest sibling of King Charles, has often been described as steady and understated. Sophie, particularly in the later years of Queen Elizabeth's life, became one of the monarch's closest confidants. Their family rhythm was consistent. Low-profile engagements, strong internal loyalty, minimal public controversy. Louise grew up inside that environment. When she was eligible to be styled as Her Royal Highness, Princess Louise, she did not publicly adopt the title. Instead, she remained Lady Louise. It was not a dramatic rejection. It was simply continuity with how she had always lived. No escalation, no repositioning. In an institution where titles carry weight and visibility can be leveraged, choosing restraint is not insignificant. She attended school without cultivating public celebrity. She does not maintain official social media accounts. She has not given interviews defining her personal narrative. When she appears at major royal events, she does so without theatrics. She stands composed, observant, present. For Queen Elizabeth, who spent decades navigating the delicate balance between public role and private self, that composure would not have gone unnoticed. But perhaps the most revealing dimension of Louis's character emerged through her relationship with Prince Philip. The Duke of Edinburgh was famously direct, often reserved, and deeply committed to discipline. He had little patience for performance without substance. In his later years, he devoted significant time to carriage driving, a sport requiring concentration, control, and calm under pressure. He personally taught Louise. Those lessons were not symbolic. They were practical. Hours spent across open ground at Balmoral, precision handling of reins, understanding the horses, reading terrain. It was not glamorous work. It required patience. When Prince Philip passed away in April 2021, the world watched a carefully orchestrated funeral under pandemic restrictions. Family members were spaced apart. Ceremony was stripped back. Yet, one image cut through the formality. Louise driving Philip's carriage as part of the tribute procession. She was 17. She did not give a speech. She did not seek attention. She honored him in the language he had taught her through action. That moment encapsulated something essential. Loyalty expressed through continuity. In a monarchy that has endured public ruptures, loyalty is not abstract. It is measured. In recent years, the royal family has faced interviews that pulled private conversations into global circulation, memoirs that detailed internal tensions, legal disputes that exposed internal fractures. Each event chipped at the aura of cohesion that once defined the institution. Against that backdrop, Louise remained unchanged. She did not defend. She did not counterattack. She did not reposition herself for sympathy. She continued her studies, eventually enrolling at the University of St. Andrews, the same university where Prince William met Catherine. It was a subtle but symbolic choice, aligning education with continuity rather than disruption. Elizabeth valued continuity above almost all else. Throughout her 70-year reign, she rewarded those who preserved institutional dignity. Invitations to Balmoral were never random. Seating arrangements at services were not accidental. Jewelry gifts carried meaning. Presence conveyed trust. Louise was present, not at the center of political maneuvering, not in the headlines, but present in the spaces that mattered to Elizabeth personally. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from senior royal duties in early 2020, the monarchy faced a moment of recalibration. Sophie and Edward quietly stepped forward, assuming additional responsibilities without complaint. Their family's reliability increased in visibility, and with that visibility came proximity to the Queen. Louise was part of that orbit. It is tempting to interpret inheritance solely as favoritism, but in royal dynamics, it often reflects value alignment. Elizabeth's world was shaped by duty, restraint, and an almost unwavering commitment to discretion. She rarely articulated her internal emotions publicly. Instead, she communicated through gesture. If she chose to leave part of her most cherished estate to Louise, it suggests recognition, not of ambition, not of strategic advantage, but of character consistent with her own. There is also generational symbolism at play. Louise represents a branch of the family not defined by scandal, not central to succession tension, and not burdened by public polarization. She exists slightly adjacent to the throne, yet fully inside the family fabric. That position grants flexibility without threatening hierarchy. For a monarch who understood the dangers of imbalance, that balance would matter. Louise is not loud. She is not divisive. She does not test institutional boundaries. In a family where visibility can fracture unity, quiet steadiness becomes powerful. Queen Elizabeth spent a lifetime protecting the monarchy from collapse through controlled evolution. She adapted without appearing to bend. She modernized without surrendering core values. In Louise, she may have seen a future custodian of that subtle equilibrium. Not someone who would dominate headlines, but someone who would preserve tone. And in the language of royal legacy, tone is everything. If Queen Elizabeth's choice revealed her private values, then Prince William's response revealed something just as important: the direction of the monarchy's future. When Elizabeth passed away in September 2022, a constitutional shift occurred instantly. Balmoral, as part of her personal estate, transferred to King Charles. Ownership changed hands. Authority consolidated. On paper, the transition was seamless. But within any royal household, paper is only half the story. Because inheritance inside a dynasty is never just legal. It is relational. For Lady Louise to retain a cottage within the Balmoral grounds under the new reign, alignment among senior figures mattered. King Charles now held the estate. Decisions regarding its use, maintenance, and access rested with him. And yet, according to palace reporting, Prince William took an active interest in ensuring that Louis's position was respected. That detail deserves examination. William is not merely a supportive cousin. He is the Prince of Wales, the heir. Every action he takes now is interpreted as rehearsal for kingship. His alliances signal future architecture. His priorities foreshadow institutional tone. So why step in? The answer lies partly in history. William has witnessed firsthand how fragile internal cohesion can become. He grew up inside a marriage that fractured publicly. He watched the press dissect private pain. As an adult, he experienced a different kind of rupture when his brother chose a path outside the royal framework. Whether one agrees with Harry's decisions or not, the result was undeniable distance, distrust, and structural reconfiguration. William understands what happens when younger members feel unsupported or disconnected from the institution. Louise represents the opposite trajectory. She has not distanced herself. She has not criticized the monarchy. She has not monetized proximity. She has remained steady, aligned, and discreet. In many ways, she embodies the quieter branch of the family that continued working without complaint when public scrutiny intensified. By ensuring her inheritance moved forward without obstruction, William was not simply honoring Elizabeth's wish. He was reinforcing a principle. Loyalty will be supported. This principle matters because William's generation will define the monarchy in an era of heightened transparency and reduced difference. The institution no longer operates in a world where silence guarantees respect. It operates in a landscape where narrative moves at digital speed. To survive, the monarchy must cultivate figures who stabilize rather than inflame. Louise fits that mold. There is also the broader context of King Charles's health. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that Charles had been diagnosed with cancer following treatment for an enlarged prostate. While the specific type of cancer was not publicly disclosed, the message was clear. The king would continue treatment while managing a modified schedule. That announcement accelerated perception of transition. William stepped forward more visibly. State duties expanded. Diplomatic appearances increased. He began functioning not only as heir in waiting, but as de facto stabilizer. When a reigning monarch faces health uncertainty, internal dynamics sharpen, trust becomes currency. In such an environment, William's protective stance towards certain family members reveals strategic intent. He appears to be shaping an inner circle defined less by birth order and more by reliability. Edward and Sophie, now Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, have assumed expanded roles with minimal controversy. Their steady presence aligns with William's emerging leadership style. Low drama, high discipline, controlled messaging. Louise, as their daughter, sits within that trusted perimeter. Contrast this with figures who have been sidelined. Prince Andrew lost official duties following public controversy tied to his association with Jeffrey Epstein in a widely criticized interview. He no longer occupies a working role. Prince Harry resides in California outside the formal structure of the monarchy. After stepping back from senior duties and publishing personal accounts that deepened internal strain, these developments did not merely reduce numbers. They reshaped internal equilibrium. William's involvement in safeguarding Louis's inheritance suggests he is reinforcing the branch that remained aligned during turbulence. This is not about favoritism. It is about continuity management. A future king must assess not only who stands closest in bloodline, but who strengthens institutional coherence. In modern monarchy, perception is as powerful as protocol. Aligning publicly with steady figures sends reassurance. There's another subtle layer. Balmoral is symbolic territory. It was Elizabeth's refuge. It carries emotional capital by supporting Louise's place within that estate. William is signaling reverence for his grandmother's private wishes. In doing so, he binds himself to her legacy, not just ceremonially, but operationally. He is saying, through action rather than proclamation, the values she protected will be protected, and those values, discretion, restraint, loyalty, have not always been evenly distributed across the family. It is easy to interpret such moves as exclusionary. But monarchy by nature narrows as it modernizes. Public funding scrutiny, media exposure, and generational change require tighter operational cores. The era of sprawling, loosely defined royal roles is diminishing. William appears to understand this. His model seems leaner, more focused, more emotionally filtered. Louise's position within Balmoral, protected rather than marginalized, fits that architecture. It also communicates something about mentorship. William is only a few years older than Louise. Their generational overlap positions him not only as future sovereign, but as near-peer guide. By ensuring her place within the estate remains secure, he creates stability for a younger royal who may eventually take on greater visibility. He learned from fracture. Now he appears to be reinforcing cohesion. The monarchy is often described in constitutional terms: succession, regency, crown property, but beneath those mechanics lies a quieter framework. Trust networks. Who is invited? Who is defended? Who is prioritized? William's involvement in this inheritance is less about property lines and more about trust lines. He is drawing them carefully, and not everyone, it seems, is inside. If William's actions hint at the monarchy's future, then Queen Camilla's position reveals the complexity of its present. To understand why the inheritance to Lady Louise carries emotional undertones, one must examine not only who was chosen, but who was not at the center of that choice. Camilla, as queen consort, stands beside King Charles in every formal capacity. She attends state visits. She represents the crown at official engagements. She occupies a constitutionally recognized role. Yet monarchy has always operated on two parallel tracks: the formal structure and the emotional structure. Formally, Camilla is secure. Emotionally, her position has always been more layered. Her relationship with Charles began in the early 1970s. It preceded his marriage to Diana Spencer in 1981. That history became one of the most scrutinized narratives in modern royal life. The marriage between Charles and Diana fractured publicly, culminating in separation and divorce. Diana's interview in 1995, in which she famously remarked that there were 3 people in her marriage, reshaped public perception overnight. More than 20 million viewers in the United Kingdom watched that broadcast. The damage to Charles's reputation was immediate and profound. Camilla's presence in that story became inseparable from the turmoil. When Charles and Camilla eventually married in April 2005, the ceremony was civil, not religious. It took place at Windsor Guildhall. Notably, Queen Elizabeth did not attend the ceremony itself, though she hosted a reception afterward at Windsor Castle. Official explanations framed this as respect for constitutional roles and church considerations. Yet the optics lingered. The sovereign was present at the celebration, but absent from vows. In monarchy, optics matter. For years, public discourse speculated about Camilla's eventual title. Early communication suggested she would be known as Princess Consort when Charles became king, a designation designed to soften public resistance. The title Queen Consort carried historical weight and emotional baggage. It required acceptance not only from Parliament, but from the public, and perhaps most delicately from within the family. In February 2022, during Platinum Jubilee celebrations marking 70 years of Elizabeth's reign, a carefully worded statement expressed the Queen's sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when the time came. The announcement was measured. It was dignified, but it was also strategic. The phrasing did not erupt with enthusiasm. It was deliberate, considered, almost legalistic in tone. This distinction between duty and affection is subtle, but significant. Elizabeth was a monarch who separated personal sentiment from institutional necessity. She understood compromise. She understood political realism. Supporting Camilla's title stabilized Charles's reign. It reduced ambiguity. It prevented prolonged debate during succession. But a monarch's private will operates in a different space. A will is not negotiated with Parliament. It is not shaped by public relations. It reflects personal disposition. If Elizabeth chose to leave a cherished piece of Balmoral to Lady Louise rather than redistribute private assets in a way that centered the queen consort, it invites interpretation not as rejection, but as prioritization. Because Balmoral was never about constitutional rank, it was about emotional trust. Camilla, by all official accounts, developed a respectful and steady relationship with Elizabeth in the later years. Their interactions were cordial. Public engagements appeared harmonious. Yet warmth in public does not always translate into intimacy in private. There is a difference between acceptance and belonging. Belonging in Elizabeth's world was earned through longevity of loyalty, quiet service, and alignment with the monarchy's tone. Camilla's path into the royal family was turbulent. It carried public skepticism that endured for decades. Even after rehabilitation of her image through consistent work, the memory of earlier years never fully vanished from cultural consciousness. Elizabeth, who endured enormous strain during the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage, would have carried that history internally, not necessarily with resentment, but with awareness. And awareness shapes legacy decisions. The inheritance to Louise can be read as an affirmation of a different branch of the family, one untouched by past scandal, one defined by steady discretion. It signals where emotional continuity resides. It does not strip Camilla of her role. It does not diminish her authority as queen consort, but it places the emotional center of Balmoral elsewhere. There is another dimension to consider: generational alignment. Camilla's identity within the monarchy is closely intertwined with Charles. Her authority flows from partnership. When Charles ascended the throne, she rose with him. Her influence is significant within his reign. But when William eventually becomes king, Camilla's role transitions to Queen Dowager. That shift reduces formal power. It alters proximity to decision-making. If William's inner circle is already coalescing around figures such as Edward, Sophie, and potentially Louise, Camilla's long-term influence may depend more on personal relationships than institutional structure, and those relationships have always been complex. William's loyalty to his mother's memory is well documented. While he has maintained public civility with Camilla, the emotional terrain is nuanced. Time has softened tensions, but history does not evaporate. In that context, Elizabeth's private choice gains additional texture. By anchoring a portion of Balmoral to Louise, she reinforced a lineage that bypasses earlier controversy. It roots the estate's emotional future in stability rather than reconciliation. Monarchy survives on symbolism as much as statute. When Elizabeth communicated her wish regarding Camilla's title during the Jubilee, she did so publicly, intentionally, and strategically. When she arranged her private estate, she did so silently. Public endorsement can secure institutional calm. Private bequest reveals personal gravity. Camilla remains central to Charles's reign. She fulfills duties with consistency. Her charities and engagements contribute to the monarchy's public presence. Yet, the inheritance narrative subtly delineates emotional territory. It suggests that while Camilla stands beside the throne, she may not stand at the heart of Balmoral's memory. That distinction is not explosive. It is quiet. But in royal language, quiet distinctions carry weight. Because monarchy is not only about crowns and titles. It is about who is trusted with the spaces where the crown is set down. And in Elizabeth's final gesture, that trust appears to have been placed elsewhere. If the inheritance of a cottage feels small on paper, the shift it represents is anything but small. Because what we are witnessing is not simply the distribution of private property. We are witnessing the quiet reorganization of emotional power inside one of the oldest institutions in the world. Every monarchy operates on two systems at once. The first is visible titles, line of succession, constitutional law, public funding, ceremonial hierarchy. The second is invisible trust, access, proximity, emotional legitimacy. Queen Elizabeth mastered the balance between those systems for more than 70 years. She understood that the crown survives not only through law but through tone, through the careful calibration of who feels included and who is gently distanced. Now, that calibration is evolving. King Charles reigns, but his reign began under extraordinary scrutiny and personal vulnerability. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace confirmed that he had been diagnosed with cancer. While he continues to carry out duties, his schedule is managed carefully. Public appearances fluctuate. Treatment remains ongoing. That reality has accelerated transition dynamics. Prince William is no longer merely preparing for kingship in theory. He is operating in practice. Each engagement he undertakes, each decision he influences builds the framework of a monarchy he will eventually lead. And the framework he appears to be building is leaner. In previous generations, the royal family functioned with a broader working body. Numerous cousins and extended relatives undertook patronages. Public roles were more diffuse, but modern scrutiny, financial transparency, and shifting public sentiment have forced consolidation. The monarchy cannot afford fragmentation. In recent years, fragmentation has already occurred. Prince Andrew stepped back from public duties after controversy surrounding his association with Jeffrey Epstein in a widely criticized interview. His withdrawal reshaped the working structure. Prince Harry and Meghan chose to step back from senior royal roles and relocate abroad, further reducing the operational core. The result is a smaller institution. In such an environment, loyalty becomes strategic capital. Edward and Sophie have increasingly filled operational gaps with little fanfare. They represent continuity without controversy. Their presence reassures rather than destabilizes. Their daughter, Lady Louise, belongs to that stable branch. By supporting her place within Balmoral, William is reinforcing a pattern. The future monarchy will prioritize steadiness over spectacle. There is symbolism in geography. Balmoral has long functioned as a reset point for the royal family. It is where tensions cooled, where difficult conversations unfolded away from cameras, where children ran across open fields without press intrusion. It is also where Queen Elizabeth passed away. That location sealed Balmoral as sacred ground in the modern royal narrative. Its emotional gravity intensified. Whoever occupies space within it occupies symbolic continuity. When Elizabeth anchored a portion of that estate to Louise, she was not merely gifting walls and land. She was embedding a younger generation inside memory. And when William ensured that embedding remained undisturbed, he aligned himself with that memory. This alignment matters because monarchy is ultimately about story. The story William appears to be shaping emphasizes discipline, emotional containment, controlled modernization, fewer voices, but stronger cohesion. Contrast this with earlier eras when public disagreements spilled outward. Interviews fractured mystique. Memoirs detailed grievances. Legal disputes exposed vulnerability. The lesson from those years seems clear. Expansion without alignment invites instability. William's emerging circle reflects contraction toward trust. Camilla's future position underscores this transition further. As queen consort, her authority is tied to Charles's reign. When William becomes king, she will hold the title of Queen Dowager. Respect will remain, but operational influence will likely narrow. The center of gravity will shift generationally. That generational shift is already visible. William and Catherine present a model grounded in measured visibility and family stability. Edward and Sophie mirror that steadiness. Louise, studying at St. Andrews, the same university where William met Catherine, embodies continuity across educational and social lines. This does not mean exclusion is dramatic. It is often subtle. Monarchies rarely announce emotional reconfiguration. They demonstrate it through seating arrangements, property allocations, joint appearances, and absence. Absence can be louder than speech. The inheritance narrative does not accuse. It does not confront. It simply reveals alignment. And alignment is everything. When public trust fluctuates, Financial considerations also hover in the background. Balmoral, like all large estates, carries maintenance costs. King Charles has signaled interest in cost efficiency across royal operations. Yet the cottage associated with Louise appears secure. That security suggests prioritization amid pruning. Pruning is not destruction. It is refinement. The British monarchy is refining itself in real time. It is narrowing to figures who generate stability rather than uncertainty. It is centering branches that have not challenged institutional coherence. It is preparing for a reign under William that will likely be more controlled, more focused, and less forgiving of deviation. Lady Louise may or may not choose a prominent working role in the future. At 21, her path remains flexible. She could maintain a private life adjacent to the crown. She could gradually assume duties if needed. That ambiguity is part of her value. She's not overexposed. Flexibility within loyalty is rare. Queen Elizabeth's final private decision suggests she recognized that rarity. It will remain sealed for decades. Legal pages will not be open for public scrutiny anytime soon. But monarchy has always communicated through gesture more than disclosure. An invitation to Balmoral, a brooch gifted quietly, a cottage placed in careful hands. These gestures accumulate into narrative, and the narrative emerging now is clear. The future of the crown will be shaped not by those who command headlines, but by those who preserve equilibrium. Queen Elizabeth spent a lifetime safeguarding that equilibrium. In her final private act, she appeared to identify who could help sustain it. Not the loudest voice, not the most powerful title, but the steadiest presence. And as the monarchy moves through uncertainty into its next chapter, steadiness may prove to be its most valuable inheritance of